Good morning and welcome to another Customer Success Office Hours. As always, I'm Matt Vandenbeld at vCloud Matt. I'm joined today by Z House, Will Rodbard, Rick Hoffman. We also have some of our illustrious CSM team in the chat: Brian Bender, Dennis Hopp, and Rashad Jenkins. Again, we were just discussing there's not much formal on the agenda again today. Like I said, we try to keep these office hours free flowing. Anything that anybody wants to talk about. Um, Not a very good hockey game last night for the Flames, unfortunately. I think Z's still away, so he can't rub it in.
I'm here, but
Oh, he
I did
came
not
back just for that.
I did not get it watched last night.
It was not good. It was the Flames lost, but are only down a game, so I don't want to talk too much about hockey, although me and Rick had a good time at our internal conference watching the Vegas team. They actually put on a pretty good show. If anybody's in Vegas during hockey season, I think VMworld's too early for it, but VMworld's in San Francisco this year anyway. But Dell Technology World is coming up, which I'll be in a couple weeks, and if Vegas is still in it, maybe I'll see if I can grab a ticket to the game, which I'm sure would cost a lot of money. Um, But yeah, up what I have up on the screen here for everybody that's watching on Twitch or YouTube, I guess everybody's probably gonna see this is our Wavefront technology, and this is a company we acquired, and it's actually an extremely cool little utility, and it's kind of our cross cloud application centric monitoring utility. It's really was born and developed out of the kind of cloud native world, and we're starting to heavily leverage it for that cross cloud offering that we have. And I kind of just have up our vSphere dashboard right now that's monitoring our VMware Cloud instance. So you can see here that it definitely works with VMware Cloud. It'll work with AWS resources. It'll work with other vendors' clouds and stuff like that as well. Um, but it's actually a pretty unique real-time, uh, extremely well-built engine to take in a lot of metrics very, very quickly. But so I just kind of thought I'd just kind of playing around with it for the most part here. But I thought it was kind of worth mentioning that we talk a lot about VMware Cloud and AWS because that's primarily our focus. But as a company, we're really building that cross cloud story, and a lot of our tools. If you were to go back to even our network insight can work cross clouds. If we go to our we look at our console, a lot of these products that are here are actually, Cloud Assembly, our VRA in the cloud, can deploy to AWS. It can deploy to Azure, I think, Google Cloud soon. So all of our tools actually really kind of work cross-cloud, with VMware Cloud just kind of being one of the public clouds that's available for a lot of our services. So, I just kind of want to mention that because that's something that comes up a lot now. I see in the industry, and then maybe you guys can comment on whether or not your customers are in this as well. As it, I've noticed a lot of our customers themselves have discovered how much they're using other clouds when they're using VMware Cloud on AWS. Have that conversation with customers. Say, well, we need, when you set up VMware Cloud in AWS, one of the prerequisites is you need to have an AWS account and an AWS VPC created, and a lot of our customers start off the conversation by going, "Well, I don't think we have that," and then all of a sudden it's like, "Well, we actually have a lot of them that we didn't know about." So the VMware Cloud and AWS is kind of leading that charge to a degree about um, bringing these cloud teams together. To me, it's very similar to the early days of when vSphere brought the storage and networking and server teams together. Now we seem to be bringing the uh, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, all the cloud teams and the vSphere team together. Is that something you guys are seeing across your customers as well? Anybody?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what was interesting in a customer I was working at recently is they were already self-confessed fairly heavy users of AWS native, and then when we looked into it, they were actually hitting some of the limits of parts of AWS that they would then have to change, like the numbers of direct connects and the numbers of VIFs they've got running, that they're going to have to change to enable them to use VMware Cloud on AWS because they'd gone into it. Organically, shall we say. So a lot of different departments consuming, and then when they looked at the whole, they realized they were using a lot more than they thought they were using.
Yeah, and I would say for me personally, it's been kind of a mix. I've got a couple customers that are only AWS customers because of EMC. But on the other side of that, then there's a lot of them that are heavily invested in the AWS service area. So
Yeah, like I said, I agree. I've kind of had a mixed bag. There's a few customers I've kind of had to talk through how to set up the AWS account and put their credit card in
yeah,
and all that kind of fun stuff. But then there's another lot of quite a few customers I've worked with that are just like, wow, we have. I never knew we had this many AWS resources out there.
yeah,
And so like I said, it's just kind of history always kind of repeats itself a little bit. And again, now we're bringing together these cloud teams, and that's why I like VMware's vision in this regard. Is we understand you're going to use AWS for some stuff, right? I mean, it's they're the biggest cloud on the planet. It's going to be there, but a lot of our products will work across that, and where it makes sense to use VMware Cloud on AWS, use it. Where it makes sense to use AWS, use that. But I'll temper that with a little bit, and I talk about this a little bit in the VMUG talks and stuff that I do, is just because you're in AWS doesn't mean you're cloud native. And,
yeah,
and I find that a lot of people think that, right? So just running an EC2 workload in AWS is again, depending on how it's developed, right? But if you took a VM from VMware and converted it to a AWS EC2 instance, it's not cloud native just because it's there. And I think a lot of people think that just because my resources are in AWS or in a public cloud, as it were, I'm now cloud native. So it's kind of one of those ambiguous terms, and I always try to bring that up to say that cloud native is more of an application topology. It's not actually technically where it runs. You could have cloud native applications running on-prem, really, which is kind of a misnomer, but it's more of how the application is developed and leverages resources than it is where it sits per se. And we have a very good story coming around um, a lot of our cloud native, and I guess where that conversation I was kind of going with that is you don't need to go to Google or to AWS to develop cloud native applications. We're really striving hard to become to that game, which we evidenced by our Heptio acquisition, which really put us into that Kubernetes game. I mean, that's literally the creators of Kubernetes. So, we're really kind of stepping up our game there. Maybe again, we're a little bit late to the party, but hopefully we're bringing the good gifts because we're a little bit late.
yeah,
But
I guess it's worth calling out that what we do bring to the game is a solution that will be enterprise ready. So it'll have the feature sets that you expect from an enterprise ready set of applications, right? So the ability to manage it and upgrade it and roll it out, all those sorts of things that you don't often get from some of the more cloud native platforms when they first arrive on the scene. So yeah, like I say, we're a bit late, but we come very feature rich.
I think that's a fantastic point, Will. Thanks for bringing that up. Is the early days of Kubernetes and stuff is, or not Kubernetes, if you go back even further to kind of the Docker startup, was kind of the wild west of you know applications where guys were grabbing stuff off of GitHub, hacking around with it, putting it into production, and nobody knew where it was, how it worked, how to secure it. And that's, yeah, I think primarily where a lot of our value comes from is the networking components, the security components, the monitoring now with Wavefront and auditing and logging and all that kind of stuff. That yeah, this is not a container necessarily running on somebody's desktop or laptop anymore. This is a production system and has to be treated as such. And we're good at that game. So yeah, I think that's an extremely good point. I've also seen numbers around, that the number of containers versus VMs is, I don't know, roughly 3 to 1, give or take. But I always kind of wonder how many of those containers are literally just running on some guy's laptop somewhere.
Or their NAS at home or something like that.
Yeah, and I mean, it's good to try to get in, capture that market, and we definitely see the value of the containers game now. And I remember reading a Docker article last, I guess, 2 years ago, and the Gartner article kind of went around, the flash of the pan that Docker was going to be, which actually turned out to be pretty true. The concept that Docker brought was not necessarily new. I mean, containers have kind of been around in one shape or form for a very long time. But it did really bring about the advent of containers as a viable application platform that I think then, Google jumped on and, developed Kubernetes, which is now the de facto standard. And I don't know how long that'll be the de facto standard. I remember for those of us that work at VMware, there's a team member we have, Ahmad Benjamin, and he's a chief technologist, and Michael Gash, who's our Kubernetes kind of guy. And I remember sitting in a presentation that they did, and they went through a bunch of slides about here was kind of yesterday's cool utilities to work with. And that was like 2 months ago. Now here's all the other new stuff that people are working with. And here's kind of what we think people are going to be working with next month. It's a incredibly dynamic space. And I got to be honest, I don't envy developers. I mean, I have a tough time keeping up with all of the changes we're making, to go through all of the different platforms and tools those guys use. It's just insane.
Yeah.
It's an incredible world, and we're seeing it a little bit on our side too. Now that VMware Cloud has moved to kind of this more CI/CD type, and I'm playing buzzword bingo for anybody that's playing at home. You might have the blackout card already, but it's definitely like we're feeling that pain a little bit as an organization as well, around constantly developing things, constantly checking in code, testing code, very quick iterative processes. It's a definitely more on-demand world than I think when I started in this the vSphere business, where we had a major release every 2 years, and that's kind of what everybody based all their timings off of. Now seems like every other day at least. But that's kind of the dynamic world we work in, and it's as evidenced by I've been thinking about purchasing a new car, and so I've been kind of paying attention now to some of the car commercials while I'm kind of watching TV to see kind of what's going on, and I've noticed that I don't think any car commercial I've watched in the last few months at least has actually told me what engine was in the car. I've gotten works with Apple Play, the Google Car Plug or Google Play plugin, advanced sensors, auto driving, all of these kinds of things. I don't think that they've ever actually said this has a 4-cylinder something in it. Which I think is kind of indicative of the world we live in now. And I remember working with one of our customers that is an auto company, and they have put so much more into their software engineering that it's pretty much on par with the actual mechanical engineering now. Because when people go to buy cars, most of them don't care what the engine is anymore. I mean, I kind of care, but they care about, can I plug my phone in? Will this thing park itself? All those kinds of things, which I think we're seeing that across so many industries, and that's why we're seeing such an uptick in this game, because everybody wants to get a piece of that pie. So, I mean, what do you guys think about that?
I think you're spot on. It's I have my own, probably less than ideal, probably not shared by many views on that, but no, cars. I'm surprised you're actually watching commercials. I haven't had TV or cable TV in quite a while.
I was watching hockey. Yeah,
Okay.
I couldn't avoid it. But yes.
But no, my wife's car. We bought her a Ford Escape. God, it's almost 3 years old now. Um, Same thing, right? Like you have to update it. It's got the what does Ford call it? The my Ford Touch used to be just sync. Um, it works. It's nice. It's a lot better than the old original Sync 2 system I had in my F-150. Um, but clunky, doesn't work all the time. Sometimes, it just does weird things. Um, I don't know. I think they could do more. You're probably right. The engine and stuff like that are all I don't know. Internal combustion engine has been around for 100 or so years, something like that. Pretty well refined, but all the little gadgets and widgets in it. I think it's also
Right, but
like
for me, I look at features first. If a car, there's a certain amount or minimum level of feature sets that I want from a vehicle.
yeah.
From the radar cruise. If a car doesn't do it, if a vendor doesn't make a product with that feature, I won't even look.
Yeah, but like the sales team, they don't know anything about it. I remember when we bought the Escape, there was something it's like PVD or PVS, and it was talking about like a heating system, and nobody could tell me what the acronym stood for. Like, excellent. We just bought a new house. The sales lady, like, zero idea, right? Like it doesn't matter, right? It's, I was asking about cat fight. Can I have the house wired for network? Oh no, everything's wireless these days. Was literally what came out of her mouth. So no, I think it's interesting.
Well,
I'll digress to a more pleasant topic.
that brings to mind that the IT crowd. I love that show. You Brits definitely have a way with comedy, and the wireless internet box. If anybody hasn't seen that episode, I highly recommend you watch it because that comment about everything wireless. I mean, my kid. So I have a 2009 Mazda CX-7, an older car that I've kind of had since it was brand new. But my kids get irritated because they can't play their music over Bluetooth in it, right? So this is kind of the world we do live in. We're also just got joined by Zach, one of our new guys. Zach, did you want to say hi and introduce yourself? I'm not sure if you've had the opportunity yet to do that.
I have not. So, yeah, hi, I'm Zach Zumba. Just joined the customer success team as an architect. And yeah, I spent the last 3 years or so in PSO delivering networking security, mainly NSX, V, and T.
That's good. So yes, he is the newest member of our team. So Rick's been promoted to the only semi-new guy. So now we're expecting a lot more out of you, Rick.
Yoo-hoo! Fair enough.
So we actually had a good question come in from Rashad, one of our CSMs, around. So we talk about all of this fast pace of change that VMware is going through. What about our partners and third party tools and stuff? And I think we're kind of seeing that a lot, right? So we have, as part of our compatibility list, we list what has been working with our with VMware Cloud, particularly like backup software, those types of things. But I do agree. But I'm curious as to everybody else's opinion on this because I think it's to me, as long as we make the tools available, right? So as long as we have a good API, which is something that we're continually striving to improve, and good feature sets that allow our partners to build their integrations. That's kind of our part. It's kind of, to me, it's on the partners to kind of keep pace. And I know that that's probably difficult for a lot of them because some of them are smaller teams and such like that. But I think it's on us to provide the tools for them to integrate, but I think it's kind of on them to do it. And I know we have a lot of partners that we work with, your factions, your Veeams, the EMCs, the Dells that have been releasing products that work with VMC. But I agree that there probably is a challenge there. So I guess what are your guys' thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's still a lot of, so for VMC, you're not having to update the infrastructure. So updating Virtual Center and the hosts and everything else associated with that. But now you're having to keep up with like Veeam as a good example. We were just talking about that before the call. So if there's an update to the SDDC or anything like that, or an update to Veeam, right? So you have to remain on top of that and diligent. I think there's definitely room for improvement to be more cohesive with that. But yeah, I think that for the most part, it's something that some customers are thinking about, but it also catches a number of them off guard.
I know, I think we do this even to ourselves a little bit. Like, I know that most of the times I log into our HCX portal, and if I probably logged in now, it would probably say update ready.
It won't, because I did it yesterday.
Oh, okay. I was going to do it. It's a good thing you brought that up. But that happens, right? So I think, I think that this is a multiple fold kind of issue. I don't know, issue is maybe not the right word, but right. So to me again, like it's on us to provide the tools for people to integrate, and a lot of that's through API or through commandlets or something to that nature, which. I agree and concede that in the past we weren't necessarily fantastic with, but I think we've learned that lesson and are getting better and continue to strive to get better. And then it's kind of on the partner, to work with us to update their products to increase functionality or just resume functionalities as we update things. And then there's kind of that third part where, to a degree, a lot of this work actually ends up in the customer's end of actually doing all the updates. So at least we take care of the updates from the VMC side.
Can I add to that as well, actually,
sure.
Matt? So one of the challenges we had, or all software vendors had in the past when they created these sort of massive monolithic systems that you might receive one update a year or even longer for, was that the pace of change that happened in between those updates would mean that the software itself was sometimes out of usability date, if that makes sense. So there was other stuff that came along. So third parties update faster, and then we couldn't update as fast. So if you look at the VRA example, so we have vRealize automation, and now we've produced cloud automation services.
Cloud assembly.
Cloud assembly. So two very different product stacks from how they're built. Okay, and one of the complaints we had with VRA, just one or two complaints we had with VRA was how hard it was to get it to work with third-party products. So ServiceNow, other sort of leading field products in their own domain, that we couldn't get it to work, and to get things to work took a massive code base change. Whereas Cloud Assembly is built in a much more sort of microservices kind of manner, meaning we can push these smaller updates out and make it more adaptable and grow in a lot less of a destructive manner. And it's the way that all software vendors will have to go, whether it be SaaS-based or on-prem based in the install itself. If you keep it in such a big monolithic state, it'll kill itself in the long run. And I think that as third-party vendors, to go back to your original question, Richard, as third-party vendors also do this with their software, so long as there is that communication channel, whether it be an API base or whatever, and we work together closely, I don't think we will outpace each other in the same way that we used to do when all our software was massive and really cumbersome and really painful to work with.
No, I think that's a valid point. And I appreciate that viewpoint. I think to a degree, what the core you kind of touched upon is we're seeing kind of a fundamental change with how updates are done, how often they're done, and how they're looked at. Right. So, like you talked about, like the older days. I mean, I've seen ESX hosts that have thousands of days of uptime, which, in one hand, is very good on us because it's like, well, look, this thing's been running fine for 2,000 days. And then what's bad is how many security updates are you missing, right? Um, and so we've kind of come, and that was kind of the very traditional way of you set up. And then Microsoft were kind of the ones that said, okay, no, now you got to update at least monthly. So every second Tuesday, everybody took that server reboot, right? And now it's again, yeah, it's moving more on demand, and a lot of that resiliency and availability is kind of moving its way back out of the infrastructure into the applications, so that the applications are designed to, like I said, to update in a manner that is kind of independent of the infrastructure, so that it maintains its own uptime. Um, but it's a fundamental change where even now you can't really look at a monthly patching cycle, as it were, because of the security world that we're in, and where threats keep coming up in different areas and different. We talked about the myriad of DevOps tools that and developing languages and all this kind of stuff that people are working in. That updates are constant, and I think that this is a little bit of a fundamental shift in thinking. And I know as from myself as an administrator, you were kind of used to this regular cadence of I update these things every second Tuesday, and that's all I worry about.
Well, we've kind of created the same thing with VMC, right? So we know we have a major update roughly every quarter, and then incremental updates that are going to be in between that. And just real quick on the massive amounts of uptime, I think we've all seen similar things like that. But particularly for the ESX hosts, right, that goes back to the security in depth, right? Your ESX hosts are probably not on a generally available segment. Hopefully, definitely not available on the internet, things like that. So even though they are missing security patches, there should be other mechanisms in place that are protecting and hopefully preventing any types of breaches like that. But as far as the updates, right? I mean, so at least once a quarter. And I hate to pick on Veeam, definitely not picking, but since that's what we've kind of been talking about and what we've been talking about earlier today. Um, so when there's an update to the SCDC, there may or may not be a required update to Veeam to be able to continue to interop between the two. So whether you're having maybe your Veeam infrastructure is small, or depending on how complex it is, at the end of the day, you're still 4 times a year, maybe if not more than that, minimum of 4 times a year, you're going to have to go through and manage and touch that infrastructure, similar to what you were doing with your virtual environment previously, more than likely.
No, I think that's a very valid point, and like I said, we even evidenced it with the HCX updates that kind of come all the time. Now, I guess it bears in mind. I guess maybe RSS feeds are the way to do this. We're working on different ways of ensuring we notify everybody of these updates as well. Now, all of our to the original kind of comment and question around third party partners, all of our partners are well aware of our roadmaps and things that are coming. So again, this is where I'm not trying to shift blame per se, but modify responsibility of they know it's coming. So like I said, it's we need to make it. We need to let everybody know what we're doing and make the interface and the way of integrating as easy as possible. Then it's on the partner to kind of keep up with that, and then it's on the end user to then also put this into action as well. So there's
this definitely isn't unique to VMware or to VMware Cloud and AWS, right? So any provider of infrastructure or software, almost anything in the IT stack is going to be in the same position, right? So no matter what it is.
No, I agree. But I think that from my experience anyway, and again, your guys' opinion would be fantastic here, is I feel like a lot of our customers, especially the VMware Cloud realm, we're a little bit more used to that, big bang upgrade every year or two, and then work through the problems then, as opposed to worrying about this month, quarterly at the very least.
Yeah. I mean, 6.7 update 2 released, was it Friday or Wednesday sometime last week? And it's, it's a typical major release to Virtual Center and ESX, right? So there's limited support for some of the add-in. You mentioned VRA earlier, Will. I used to do a lot of VRA stuff, so that was definitely, everybody always wanted to go. It's like, oh, 6.5 is out or whatever the latest and greatest is, but you can't go to it yet. Or on the other side of it, the new version of VRA is out, but your underlying infrastructure is lagging because you haven't touched it in so many years. So I don't know. I don't know. There's definitely room for improvement. I think but it's room across the board. I mean, I think that if somebody were to come up with a solution or some type of framework or methodology that companies would follow, I think they would be a very wealthy individual or company as well as I mean it would it would solve a lot of, I think this isn't the majority of problems in IT in general, but I mean it's definitely, I can almost guarantee that every customer is having to deal with this. So
there are two sides to it, right? So one, the updates are partially driven by a developer, and developers, like we've already discussed, like playing with the newest toys and suddenly discovering new languages to work with and everything else, which means we will always have this continuous cycle of things changing. And the other side is the panacea of getting to the state of it doesn't really matter that there's an update, because the update in and of itself is non-destructive, non-impactful, doesn't impact ongoing activities, and doesn't change too much, too drastically, that other things then break because of it. And if everything's in that rolling cycle, but I don't think we'll ever get to a stage where even just us, one company, I don't think we'll ever be at a stage where everything we make will always be in sync and always work with each other, because people work at different rates, different cycles. There are different making things really different times, right? It's a nice to have, but
Well, I think you touched on a great point there, Will, and Z as well. That there was there's a book out there they're talking about. There's a famous line anyway that you can tell a company's organizational structure by looking at their software. And I think that still rings extremely true for those of us on the team that are members of our CTO ambassador program. One of the panelists brought up a book called The Innovator's Dilemma, which I've been reading through now. So I'm just trying to kind of weird flex that I read, but it actually does cover a lot of these kinds of things where talking about the disruptive technologies and how some companies do it better and some don't. And a lot of it comes down to, even when we're talking about updates, is how your organization is built to handle these types of things. And I think we're getting better at it. As Will touched upon, we've definitely had some of our issues in the past, and we still continue to work with it. And we see this all across the industry. Is that yes, the vCenter guys are working on their product, the vCenter guys are working on theirs, the SRM guys are working on theirs, and to me, one of the greatest things about VMware Cloud and AWS is we've really forced these guys to at least have a conversation together and say, okay, let's work together, or at least take a look at all of our roadmaps and see where we conflict or come together, because all these products are really converging, and I still don't like the word converged infrastructure for some reason, but it's definitely coming together, and it requires kind of an organizational and a procedural mindset change at the organization to facilitate this stuff. And I think we're seeing that in our customers now as well. Like what I talked about now, the old realm was we broke down the barriers between storage and network guys and server guys. Now we're breaking down the barriers between cloud teams and also getting way more into actually working directly with application developers, which I think is kind of a different method and a very big organizational and procedural change, but one that needs to occur. Because at the end of the day, all of this stuff is designed to run an application to do some kind of business thing, right? Whether that's put an Excel spreadsheet on somebody's desktop, or run oil through a pipeline, or be a point of sale at a store. This is kind of the stuff that this infrastructure is providing, and I think we're getting further and further into that world and understanding it better, as opposed to just being purveyors of infrastructure. I know that's kind of a lofty statement, but is that something you guys agree with? Or
Yeah, no, I mean, it's at the end of the day, I mean, IT's job is not just to create a bunch of VMs or containers and suck up a bunch of energy and produce a bunch of heat, right? I mean, it's whatever the business requires.
which I think, like I said, is a fundamental change, because I remember when I first started in the industry, you kind of knew what applications were on a server. Maybe if the server was named well, if it was.
If it was called SQL 01, yeah,
Yeah, right. Or CTX, or Aura, or whatever, right? That now, now you don't even know where the server is, and to a degree, nor should you really care. And back to Will's original point is that I think that's where we really play well. Is you don't really, as an application developer, as a infrastructure support, as a network guy, where these things actually physically sit is not relevant necessarily, as long as the policies around it for your security, your compliance, your performance, all that kind of stuff is met. You shouldn't really care where it is. And I think that's a very big departure from, what we used to call, and maybe that line's still out there, but we call them server huggers, right? That the guy that, this is mine.
Yeah, the pets versus cattle argument, or maybe not argument. Argument's probably a little harsh, but I, I think it really depends. So I definitely agree with what you're saying, but I think that a lot of companies aren't set up for that. So at the end of the day, it does matter where it's running, whether it's running in VMC or AWS or some other private cloud, in one of your data centers across the country. They're so they're SQL 01, right? Maybe that's their. I'm assuming we'll say that it has an 01 in it, so that's their main SQL server. Maybe they're not a huge company, so they do need to know where it is, and they do need to treat it like a pet versus a cattle or a cow. Um, I mean, I going back to my, if somebody were to create a methodology for that, I mean, if there was something for smaller companies that they could pick up and easily apply to their company and their requirements, to shift to that mentality where it doesn't matter. So SQL 01, maybe it's on the other side of the world right now. Maybe it's running in Japan or Australia. Doesn't matter. But I don't think for some of particularly some of the smaller customers that I have, for VMC, that's just not how they operate. I mean, there's still, to your example, Matt, I mean, there's still a server hugger or in this case, a VM hugger at this point.
Yeah, it's interesting. I agree, to a point. So I guess I looked at the pets and cattle metaphor a little bit differently, I guess, than you do. So I always looked at the pets were, like you said, it was a SQL 01 server. You kind of knew where it was. It could live here, there, wherever. To me, the cattle was more, container EJ503479, that if it dies, that's what it was designed to do.
But so on that, just real quick. So if that EJ7409, whatever, if it dies, that there's some piece of infrastructure or some piece of code that says, hey, this has died, and it spins up a new one. So
absolutely, and
that's the piece that I think that most customers, particularly smaller ones, do not have the capability, maybe the talent, or the infrastructure to design for something around that.
No, and I could definitely agree with that. I think that the cattle argument is, or designation, or whatever you call it, is definitely more suited towards the quote unquote DevOps / CNA world, where yes, the all of the redundancies, availabilities, and all those kinds of things are handled at the application level, completely independent of what infrastructure it runs on. That's how they're designed. And a large amount of our customers are not at that stage. They still have a pet, like you said, SQL 01. Now, like I said, to my original point is that yeah, you kind of will care where that runs to a degree, but to me, I think the change, the thinking needs to be more like, I still care about it. It's still a pet. It's still SQL 01. But whether it's in VMware Cloud or on-prem, as long as these set of guidelines or SLAs or however you want to put it or policies are applied to it, it doesn't necessarily matter too much. I still like to know, but it doesn't really matter as long as my uptime SLA is there, my performance is being met, my compliance is being met, those kinds of things. I guess that was kind of more where I was going with my comment.
But I mean, so for that, I mean, so how would you propose that happen, right? So I mean, at any type of scale, there can't be a quote unquote VI admin or we'll call it a cattle admin for example purposes. I mean, he or she can't be, going in and making sure that these policies are applied, right? There needs to be some utility.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And,
So I can concede that point that if you kind of buy into our ecosystem where you have Lint and Network Insight and Wavefront or VROps or whatever that's managing and maintaining these policies for you so that it can alert you when it falls out of compliance, and you're on the smaller scale that either you can't prove the ROI of that kind of infrastructure, yes, then you need to be significantly more hands-on. And a decent segment of our customers still fall into that space.
And I think that's a big shift in something. So the pets versus cattle, the enterprise versus cloud native. If you rewind, it's kind of I think you said it, kind of repeating history thing. The way that I used to, or the way I originally started talking about this was platform 2 versus platform 3. Platform 2 being enterprise applications, platform 3 being cloud native. Everybody wants to be in the cloud for whatever reason. But like you said, just taking your Exchange VM and putting it in EC2 doesn't mean that Exchange is now cloud native, right? You're running a platform 2 application in a platform 3 world. So,
yeah, no, I agree, and I think. And I think we're kind of helping customers on that journey, because I think a lot, and we're seeing a lot of it as well, where a lot of the guys we work with are getting kind of executive level mandates to be in the cloud, and everybody's trying to interpret what that means. And VMware Cloud is definitely a very good, very easy, efficient way of meeting that mandate, depending on how it's put out for you. And we're seeing a lot of that customers, as they say, the CTO says, by the end of this year, we got to be 50% public cloud based. And they go, oh, okay. And again, it's not necessarily a clear mandate on what that kind of means, but to me, the VMware Cloud is the most efficient way of meeting mandates that are kind of like that. Because it's basically, you can just kind of lift and shift what's your on-premises infrastructure into the cloud and make us worry about all of the management pieces, and you just worry about the workloads, which I would have loved as an administrator, to be honest. I mean, part of me always loved that little bit of hands-on and feeling like I was really smart SSHing into a host, and running command line stuff that but when a problem arose and I could have just made it somebody else's problem, I would have killed for that.
But yeah. Now you're getting way philosophical.
It's true.
I haven't had enough coffee for this type of discussion yet.
That's true, but definitely, like I said, back to the main point is that around that lift and shift. That's what a lot of our customers are doing, is they're just taking existing applications and moving them to the cloud, usually because of a cloud mandate, or they want to get out of running a data center or something, and they've had a lot of pain. And I think that VMware Cloud alleviates, to a degree, some of that pain, at least, because you don't have to worry about refactoring, all of these kinds of things that go around moving to a different VM type. And the amount of, and I'm sure we've all seen it too, NT4 servers that are virtualized that, run some critical piece of something, that nobody wants to monkey around with. Well, you can at least make that in the public cloud, in VMware Cloud, if that's the mandate, and get it out of a data center, as opposed to having to worry about trying to turn that into a container service or
I think you're definitely showing your age. It's been quite a while since I've seen NT4. I don't even know if we
Really?
if we support NT4 either in VMC or
We definitely don't
on-prem
support it,
anymore.
but it's definitely still out there. You get a lot of like banks. There was one customer had it's the famous use case where they had their door control system for the building was on DOS or something, and they were running it in a VM because they were just too tight to buy a new one, I think.
Well, I've worked. I fly too much for this story, but I've worked with airlines that had applications for that track de-icing fluid that were linked to an NT4 domain for functionality. And nobody really, this application was built 10, 20 years ago. So the easy way of handling it, well, they just virtualized it all and then just kind of left it. So I run into that, especially in like Will said, the financial. Oil and gas is really big for this. I ran into an OS2 server not that long ago. And
Yeah, I tell you, when there's another environment there. I went to a science laboratory or laboratory, whichever, in the UK. And
Laboratory sounds better. I like that.
yeah. So they in a lab they have these old PCs that they have to go and pay manufacturers from almost the 80s to go and build, if they're still around, to build a part for them, because if they can't virtualize the system because the processors will be faster, so it'll throw out all the results they've had over the last 20 years, and they just run these things over and over and over again. So like chemical trials, medical trials, they run for 10 plus years, right? And if you change the system it's running on, it can throw all the results out. So it's
Man, better hope the cleaning person doesn't hit the turbo button on those 46s.
yeah.
The old turbo button. Did anybody not have that on all the time? I don't know. I remember back in the early days, one of my first jobs is we couldn't figure out why every day at 10 o'clock our Exchange server went offline for about 20 minutes. And we did everything we could to try to figure this out until one night, I actually sat in the data center where it's kind of like I'm just going to stare at this server and see what happens. And what happened was the cleaning crew came in, unplugged the server to plug in their vacuum cleaner, cleaned the room, and then plugged it back in. So, we're well departed from that kind of ancient history where a lot of that doesn't happen necessarily anymore. I hope the AWS cleaners don't unplug a rack or something when they're in there. But it's kind of amazing to a degree how far these things have come, and what seems like forever in my IT lifetime, but really not that long to. Nowadays, like we talked about, the applications detect that something like this happened and spin up resources in somewhere else to handle the load. So it's becoming a little bit easier and more complex at the same time. So, but that's always a fun story to tell about the cleaning lady. That was kind of fun.
When I was an admin, it's a NAT. Well, I guess they were bought out. I won't say the name, but we had a rack fall through the floor. I don't remember what it was. I think somebody the raised floor support, like it came out, and somebody just kind of half, didn't really pay a whole lot of attention when they put in there. But we were loading up servers, and late one night heard this loud crash. Everything continued to run, but go in there and see I saw something on Facebook or Twitter or something recently where there was a rack hanging from the ceiling for some reason. But see an entire rack.
Yeah, I remember. Again, this is going back. We were building an early prototype of what became the V block. We called it the F block for Franken block, actually. And yes, where we put it in the floor, you could actually see a little bow in the floor underneath it. Thankfully, it didn't break like your story, but I definitely recall that. And it's amazing, like I said, how far we came. Now we make all of this AWS's problem to go and worry about the floor stability and power redundancy, and we just add servers, which I think is, I guess, if you would have told me even 5 years ago, 5-10 years ago that I could have gone into VMware Cloud on AWS and added a host, a physical host with a drop down click, I would have probably called you crazy. But that's kind of the world we live in now. So I think that's a really kind of cool thing.
Adding hosts, I mean, so the process behind it, when I was doing VRA, I was also, as Zach was saying, I was also in professional services, and I did a lot of, I was then VCAC. That was one of the use cases was, I want to be able to add an ESX host. So it's not super difficult. It's not super complex, but it takes a lot of infrastructure, and it just takes time, right? So to kind of go back to what you said, Matt, if I could just say, hey, doing this is somebody else's problem, that's great, because then I don't have to do it. So, I'm thinking back, I don't think we ever actually got, a catalog item for deploying a new host, just because of the infrastructure, the time, and the coding that it took to do it. So it's definitely doable. There were definitely customers that were wanting it, for a long time now. But now in VMC, like you said, it's the easy button. We made it somebody else's job. So what is it? It's about 5 to 7 minutes. You can click on it, and out of nowhere, here comes this all this new compute capacity.
Yeah, and integrate it in. You don't even have to add it to vCent or any of that kind of stuff. I think yeah, exactly what you said. It's kind of an amazing thing. And I was actually going to make a joke about whatever happened to physical provisioning from VRA.
From VRA, that left in 7, I think.
Well, I mean, I think Aiden, I think he dropped him. I had another call, but when we used to do live fires back in the day, we actually developed an entire part of our curriculum around that physical provisioning. Because we understood it was an issue, and there is a lot of third-party tools out there to Rashad's comments earlier around, there's HVSIM or RDP, they called it, I think, Rapid Deployment Pack, and a lot of varying tools, but they're always very, very, and VCAC was extremely complex to try to get this thing set up and running. We've made it a lot easier with like VMware Cloud Foundation for on-prem to add stuff as well. We're continuing to make it easier. So, and that's actually kind of funny because we've now seen the evolution of now how easy it was to add hosts to VMC and to not worry about that part. Now we're bringing that to the data center with like outposts and dimension and all of these other things where now all you got to do is just order it. Somebody comes in and sets it all up for you. Or you can set it up, I guess, and then you plug it into a wire and all of the stuff gets managed by us. So, I mean, it's the worlds are really quickly converging, and soon you're going to see even more AWS services on premises versus in the cloud. And, back to the original comment about like where a server lives, it's good to, now it's even going to be where does this Lambda function live? Like it's a really cool stage in the development we're going through right now, and I think I'm glad that we're at least a fairly big player in that as before we kind of weren't before we had all these offerings.
Well, I think I remember who said it, or maybe it wasn't. Maybe I was just thinking it, but what is old is new. So everybody wanted to go to the cloud, and then actually we're going to go ahead and bring the cloud to you, which is I'm sure there's some little spin you can put on that, but ultimately we're just going to take the cloud and put it in your data center. So is it really the cloud, or are you just back into running a data center again?
That's true. It's very cyclical. I made the comment 15 years ago that for some reason I'm going to end up putting a single application on a single server in a data center at the end of my career somehow. Because that's where I started off my career doing the exact opposite. So anyway, we got about 5 minutes left here, and I know we kind of went every which way with this office hours, and hopefully we some of this discussion resonated, or at least got some people thinking about the new world and how they adjust. And kind of even boils down to kind of where you're thinking about going with a career or the skill sets that you need to kind of to get to kind of be successful in this new world. And I know that me as an older man now in the IT terms, I'm almost ancient. Revamping these skills is a constant thing, but it's funny because I kind of stopped computer science in university because I didn't want to be a programmer, because back then anyway, you know, nothing like compiling 10,000 lines of SQL and watching the debugging errors come through and just kind of shaking your head because you left out a semicolon on line 3, which broke everything. To now, I definitely need to get back in that frame of thinking for a lot of the ways that we're developing and bringing our products to market. So constant thing, and maybe that's one of the things that we should do in the future is maybe even go over some of the education and or certification stuff that we have around this, because I know it came up. I just had a presentation yesterday about our NPS scores, and we're still very, very good in our NPS scores. We dipped a little bit in some years past, but we're on our way back up. But one of the key feedbacks that came out of that is customers would love more education, either bundled with the deal or educational credits or stuff like that. And this is really what we're aiming to do here as well. And like I said, I know this is kind of a long rambly thing, but hopefully there's some value and some thinking there that we want to help facilitate that as well. So, if anybody, again, and I'll reiterate this, can't reiterate this enough, is, tweet at me at vcloudmatt, email us at cloudcs@vmware.com, leave a comment on the YouTube channel, talk to us on Twitch or in Zoom about what you would like to see, what you would like perhaps some education on doing. Like I said, we're continuing to work through creating some more shorter kind of educational videos on how you do things like I put one up about how to add a host. And we're going to continue to add those, but we really want to bring this to you guys and really have some more. It's one of the things I'm working on, and one of the things that we got feedback on was integrating even some more of the AWS services with our VMware Cloud stuff. So I might grab some of our AWS counterparts to do some of that. But yeah, please give us your feedback, whether this stuff's of value, what else you want to see. Ask any questions at any time. I probably should have prefaced this at the start versus the end, but definitely give us that. I will be back online at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time tonight. We're going to go through a Mohit from our customer success engineering team. Our support guys are going to go through a troubleshooting webinar tonight if anybody's up late on the East Coast. I know it's probably too late for the EMEA folk. This is the APJ time frame, so if you're an APJ, you're probably not watching this now because it's in the middle of the night for you, but we're going to be doing that today. We got Rick still on the line. Rick and Will be doing a office hours in the EMEA time zone tomorrow morning. I think it's 11 o'clock your time, Rick, 10 GMT.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's 10 a.m. GMT. They'll be on, then I'll be back on Thursday again for APJ office hours at 4 p.m. Pacific time, which I think again is 10 a.m. in Australia, in Sydney. So again, we're here for you guys to ask questions, to present any content, and if nobody comes to us, you end up with a session like today where we sit around and pontificate on the industry and where we think it is, and our opinions of pets versus cattle. Which I thought was great anyway. It's amazing to me how we always kind of manage to fill an hour with just discussion and going over and talking about some of our products and stuff. So,
is that what we had was discussion? I thought we just filled an hour with babble.
I think that even babble has some value to somebody. I'm not sure necessarily who, but maybe Rick learned a thing. I don't know.
Especially me, I love the NT4 parts of it. So
yeah, like I said, I bet you if we were to do a poll through our VMware Cloud environment, there's probably somebody running an NT4 machine somewhere in there.
I actually put it down for me to test if it's running. But...
Well, you could actually virtualize DOS now too, so we should maybe take a look for that. But anyway, I appreciate Zach, Rick, Z, and Will came on for a little bit there. He had to leave for another meeting, but I appreciate you guys coming in. I appreciate our CSM team for attending. Rashad for asking a question, and Dennis and Brian. And so Lisa snuck in here as well. Appreciate everybody showing up. Appreciate everybody watching on Twitch. Anybody watching on YouTube. Thank you very much for your time. And like I said, I will see everybody later tonight for the webinar. And if not, next week again for another office hours. Thanks, everybody.
Cheers.
Cheers, Matt.